Hello everyone again, this is Moritz Bierling. I'm Director of Research at Exosphere, and today we have the 12th episode of the Creative Economy interviews. And with me today I have Ryan Shea, and I thought I'd try something new this time.
It's Shea.
Sorry? Shea,
Ryan
oh
Shea.
Shea, okay. So where does the name come from?
It's an Irish name.
Irish, I thought as much.
Butter, yeah.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself and highlight yourself well, like kind of what were the things in your, what you would like to highlight about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Ryan Shea, and I am co-founder of Blockstack, Inc. And we are working on a new internet. And it's decentralized internet. Code runs on your computer, on your phone. You own your own data, and you don't have to worry about any middlemen. You're not connecting to any remote servers that are owned by Facebook or Google or Amazon. It's just you and your devices and your friends and your software. And before this, I went to Princeton. I studied mechanical engineering and software development. And I also worked in a couple different startups. I also co-authored several cryptography libraries and have been in the blockchain space for some time and really, really excited about it.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I saw that you were at Princeton at an entrepreneurship club. Was that
yes.
a big kind of starting point for you in this direction?
Yeah, well, actually, I ran the entrepreneurship club at Princeton through probably its largest year of expansion. So we introduced a bunch of new initiatives. We introduced this thing called Hack Princeton, which is a hackathon which has over 500, 600 people twice a year. It's one of the top student hackathons in the country. And we also introduced 3 programming classes that were student run and student taught. And like one for Python, one for web development, and one for mobile development. And then we introduced this thing called Hack Week, which is like a week-long incubator. And then we also introduced this thing called East Coast Startup Summit, which no longer exists, unfortunately. But it was basically this big conference that would bring together people from around the country around student entrepreneurs and East Coast tech. So yeah, that was a good start for me. I mean, I'd say before college, I was always interested in being an inventor. That's what I wanted to be. And then freshman year of college, that's when I started to discover entrepreneurship. And I got involved with the entrepreneurship club, and I saw so many things that I wanted to do and apps I wanted to build. And that's also when I started getting into computer science. And for me, I thought like, okay, well, I'm a little bit of a late bloomer. I'm not doing it until I'm a freshman in college. It's kind of unfortunate, but for me, I just went at it and learned as much as I could and really poured my heart into it. And then, worked on a startup out of college and over the summer, and started discovering Valley. Went out there, went to study at Stanford for a little bit over the summer, ran the entrepreneurship club at Princeton, and got to know a lot of people in the startup world, and saw that, as a student, I thought it was really cool because I was meeting all these tech founders and VCs, and I don't know, it's like, as a young person, it's pretty interesting. And then I bring people to speak and all this other stuff, so that was pretty cool. And then I graduated, immediately started working on a startup, which obviously failed, but it was a good way for me to try my hand at starting a company. And then I was in New York, and I kept bumping into this guy that was living on my block. His name is Munib Ali, who's my co-founder. We knew each other at Princeton, and he was in the entrepreneurship club too. And he also he was one of the TAs for this class called How to Be a CTO at Princeton, and so we just kept bumping each other because we lived in the same block. And then after having a bunch of conversations, we decided to start a company together, and we got the team right first, and that was what we wanted to do. We just said, okay, look, first the team, then we'll decide what to work on. And then we started exploring things that we were both really interested in. and we realized that we're both really passionate about the decentralizing the internet and especially bringing power to the people, and like making it about individuals and making it about the software that they use rather than about these large corporations, and about consolidation and making people beholden to a few companies that control the internet, like Facebook, Google, Amazon.
Right. So basically, you put together a team. I find that very interesting. That very few people actually start with that. Like, they don't really look for the people that are on the same wavelength, but rather start with an idea, right? And then they look for people that may be able to realize that. But you started a different way. You brought together the people that you knew, that you trusted, and then you started to figure out a way to do something real, right? So,
yeah, and I think that's
so.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there are different types of risks in a startup, right? And team risk is really important. And so if you can like reduce the team risk as much as possible, that's huge. I mean, probably there's something that I read, which is like the most common reason why it's like really early startups fail is because the team breaks apart.
Yes.
And then after that, it's because they run out of money. But even a lot of times, like if in the early stages, like before you've raised money, or like when you've just pulled in some money, it's really hard. You got to make sure that there are people that you like to work with, and there are people who are all ideologically driven around what you're doing. Otherwise, there might be some people that aren't motivated, or like, so it's kind of hard, I think, for it to be like one founder, and then they come up with this idea, and then they try to inspire another co-founder to join them.
Right.
Like that definitely works, but I think it's a little, I don't know. I think you can probably have a lower chance of some kind of like disintegration if all the founders are ideologically driven early on by the mission, right?
Right. Yeah. I guess you could even say that every kind of startup failure is a team failure, because the people fail to resolve the problems between themselves and fail to coordinate well enough to solve the problems before they actually lead to failure, right? So in a way, you could bring it always back to the individuals, as you already mentioned.
Yeah. Wait, quick question. This is a silly question. Is it okay for me to switch Wi-Fi networks really quick?
Sure. That's
okay.
And I will carry the conversation until you've done that. I find it quite interesting. Yeah, I can hear you. You're back. Perfect.
Great. Nice.
All right. Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting point, because my company at Exosphere, it's very similar. Like, I also went there. We definitely hit it off the right way, and then I joined the team without really knowing where to contribute the value at first. And then over time found the places where I could apply that as well. So it's definitely a very unusual strategy. Mostly people tend to start with an idea, then look for a way to attract the right kind of people with the right kind of money, mostly. Yep. And then when that doesn't work out anymore, then the thing starts to disintegrate. But yeah, very interesting. Let's talk about, though, how you ended up being in a position to even go about doing this, because I find it most interesting what kind of the most formative experiences were in somebody's like childhood or growing up. And I would like to know from you, what kind of guy were you in school?
I was the guy that I mean, I always wanted to get an A+. That's me. I mean, especially throughout, like up through graduation of high school. What's interesting is in college, I actually was more interested in and motivated by running the entrepreneurship club and starting a company. And so those are the two things. Like, I was starting a company and I was running the entrepreneurship club. And then I prioritized those things over my over my studies, because like I don't know, I figure out, okay, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I want to start a company. I'm interested in entrepreneurship, and I have a class on heat transfer, And I'm thinking like, when the hell is this going to come in handy? Well, maybe, you know, like I'm not knocking the class, right? Like, but I did major in mechanical and aerospace engineering, which I'm super glad for all the knowledge. But I think there's so many different classes and so many different things that you go into, fluid dynamics and you know, all of these other things, and you know, I put a good amount of effort into it, but I still didn't make it my top thing. And I prioritized those things. But when I was growing up, like I did prioritize my classes a lot and my studies. And there's a few things, like I love learning, and so regardless of what that is, I will put a lot of energy into that. I would say that classes in school is a very specific type of learning where there's a controlled environment and there is a grading process, and there's like so, you know, to some extent, I think, you know, it's not ideal or it's not great, but
not the best for everybody.
If that's what you got, then do it. I mean, there would be a lot of times when I would, for example, there'd be like a biology textbook and I would read the whole thing. And I wouldn't like, I wouldn't like, let's say we had to read a couple chapters. I wouldn't gloss over things that I thought wouldn't, you know, I basically, actually my style of reading is I will reread something if I didn't get it.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
So what that ensured is that I guess I was very methodical in it. And also I think when I was very young, like 4 or 5 or 6, I was doing, I knew my grandfather was an inventor, and you know, that was one of the things that sparked my interest in being an inventor from a young age. And also my parents had me doing like math problems and things, and a lot of intellectually stimulating work.
Very interesting.
So I think that's kind of what jump-started all this. But
right, yeah, very cool. No, I ask this usually because the people that I interview, they can be like the A student usually, but they can also be somebody who just jumped out of school early on and then decided to go other ways. So people definitely have a relatively one-sided view of what success looks like when they don't encounter it in other ways. Yeah, but so Blockstack is born out of your kind of, let's say, iterative development process with the people that you work with. What kind of guarantee does somebody working using your platform have that it'll be developing in that direction further that you kind of laid out so far?
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, look, it's a decentralized system. Just like with Bitcoin and Ethereum, anyone can fork it. If you don't like the direction, you can you can go run with it. Now,
that was a trick question, more.
Yeah. Now that said, it is hard to pull together a strong development team around something, even if you disagree, you might not have the full development resources. So, like, you know, I kind of say that, but in some sense, like a perfect example is you look at Ethereum Classic. A strong team didn't form around Ethereum Classic, so it went nowhere, right? You could say, well, it should have, because there's so many potential people who could have taken up the mantle, but you know, it just might not work. But I think we do need there needs to be more maturing in the space before. But I think once you get there, like even 5 years from now, we'll probably be in a position where any one of these systems will easily fork if the majority of the network does not get behind it, right? If they'll easily fork if the people who are producing the software, the majority of the software developers, is diverging from the majority of the stakeholders. And I think. So I mentioned the Ethereum case, and another example is actually Bitcoin, where, you know, at some point I think a lot of people disagreed with the direction the core developers were taking, maybe even a majority, but the core developers have a pretty decent, they have a pretty similar perspective, and they have a pretty decent stranglehold on the development process. Which, for good or for bad, I mean, you could say, well, we should trust them if there's 50 of them, or at least 50's minor to major contributors, and they all say we shouldn't, go too aggressive with scaling. Nah, you maybe should listen to them. But and I think at least now that there's been enough time that has passed such that you can say the majority of the stakeholders in Bitcoin probably agree with the core developers at this point. That's just my naive assessment. But yeah, in our case, we can, like, one, you don't have to trust us. You shouldn't. Right? You should always preserve that ability to fork the network, and we just need to work towards that. Two, second best is trust us, and you should if you have the luxury, like, number one, don't trust us. Number two, then just do your best to trust us, and look into our practices, look into what we've done in the past, look into and see how when we present something and we say we're going to do this, that we deliver upon it, and be part of the community, join the forums, join the Slack group, hold us accountable, suggest what you would like to do. And also, we are working towards the point where there are as many minor to major contributors as there are on Bitcoin, and more, right? Like, we should keep going towards that. And that's a good thing to strive towards. So anyone can just join the development team and push this forward alongside us, right?
Right, very nice. And the plans you have for the future, like, what is the next step or the next kind of vision where you want to go?
So, there's a few things. So we actually are working on releasing this browser add-on, and it's not like the normal like browser extension that you might be familiar with, but it's like a desktop application that you download, and it runs in the background. And what it does is it takes all of your browsers and it brings them onto the Blockstack internet. And what that does is it allows them to access domain names on the Blockstack top-level domains and namespaces, and it gives users an interface for them to manage their locally owned identities and manage their storage so that applications can store data with them. So this is like the three of these components together then give users access to these decentralized apps that are built on Blockstack.
That sounds pretty huge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's I mean, and that's what we're working towards, trying to make it a really big thing and getting lots of people to use it. So, as we come out with that, we're also going to be coming out with tutorials for these decentralized apps. Things like here's how you build a decentralized Twitter on top of Blockstack. Right? There's no servers. You just go to the website. It's an HTML file that you download. Boom! All of a sudden, you have a decentralized Twitter. And it lets you log in. You bring your identity. It grabs, data from you. It writes data to your little container. You write a tweet. Boom! It stores it in your tweets folder. Then it pulls all the tweets next time it loads up. So that's it's really like a focus on developers, helping them build these decentralized apps and build them really simply. And then focusing on the users and helping them get a portal to all of these applications.
Right, and just for our viewers to understand what a big deal this is, if you look at Facebook right now and Twitter right now, I've seen an article that analyzed how this kind of dubious company, Cambridge Analytica, was very much involved in guaranteeing Trump's win in the election by actually using Facebook data and Twitter data, all these different social media data about people on the platform to influence them with targeted advertising and basically nudging them in the right direction that they wanted them. So if we take back our data about ourselves and we don't simply shell it out without charging people for it or making it only gradually and by degree accessible to other people, then we can have more of a, I guess, all the feedback loops are on us rather than on are in the control of other people.
Absolutely,
it's really important. So I mean, this is very interesting. I didn't know that you were going in this direction, and now it sounds even better than I knew. So, but also on a greater scale, like you are working on this, you're working hard on this and making this real. But what's kind of your overall assessment of the blockchain and Bitcoin space industry and community in general? Because you already said that you're looking forward to it maturing a little bit more, but like, how do you see it right now?
I think to some extent we're still figuring out governance, and to a large extent actually. Governance is probably the biggest problem in the space.
Right.
The original idea behind Bitcoin was, well, you don't have a governance problem. Governance problem is the majority of the hash power, right? And that's just like that. That's it. The problem, though, is that there's a lot of people in the space who say, well, the miners shouldn't, especially, like, there's something that you hear from core developers a lot, which is like the miner, and you know, they're kind of right, which is the miners shouldn't be the ultimate arbiters of truth. They shouldn't decide where the network goes. And neither should they, neither should the developers. I mean, what it really should be is the stakeholders of the system. But the way that Satoshi originally envisioned it, the stakeholders of the system would be the equivalent of the miners, right?
Right.
Because, you know, one computer, one vote. That was the mission. Like, that was the vision. And it's somewhat unsettling to think, okay, well, now you have 5 mining pools that control the system. How do you deal with that? Do you say, well, you know, okay, well, ultimate governance, fine. This is down to the hash power and the majority vote through proof of work, and that's it. And at least the people who own Bitcoins and the developers have the ability to veto at any time and override by forking the system. But at least in the short term, barring some drastic move on the part of the network, which might be potentially unfeasible, or I don't know, or like to corral everyone around a fork Bitcoin at this stage, I don't know. But at least in the short term, and for all practical purposes, on a day-to-day basis, those who govern are the miners. And from another perspective, you could say, well, you know, users decide what software to run. Users have ultimate control over the software and the direction. But, you know, kind of, I mean, there's still the core development team that controls the development process, right? And while anyone can be a part of it, of the development process, there is a sort of, I mean, there's a group think, there's like a maybe somewhat isolation from a lot of the businesses that are built on top of the network. There's, you know, and you know, I'm saying all these things, but I actually think the Bitcoin team is and the Bitcoin system is far ahead of anyone else. So
right,
they're doing their best, still they have challenges, you know. So I don't mean to criticize. I just kind of try to point out the shortcomings. But I think they've done an incredible job. But I think we have this, in a sense, we have these extremely high expectations of decentralization, and we kind of like expect like nothing can disrupt this, or you know, but it's far from reality, right? So we just have a lot to do to get to the point where you could say this is a system where you can say with a straight face, whatever happens in whatever direction it goes is a majority vote of 100 million people, or some, not necessarily majority, but some derivative or some indication of the will of the majority or supermajority of that network, right?
Right.
And so I think as we get there, that's when we get to more true decentralization.
Right. I mean, I guess what I'm saying, what I'm also hearing is that the technology itself has advanced so quickly and so far that we're kind of limping behind in the way that we think about these systems, because we are confronted with new problems every day and have to kind of rearrange and reorient our own internal approaches to these systems. So I think it's a good problem to have, because we actually have new problems rather than old problems. And yet we also have we re-encounter the same old problems that come with any kind of democratic approach, where people also who have more votes but maybe not have the best interest in mind of the thing, or want to take away from others, can also subvert something. So I think we're seeing actually the Bitcoin and the blockchain space as a whole advancing not only the technology that will bring us more freedom in our lives, but also advancing the conversation about what it even means to have cooperation and how to have governance. So I'm quite happy about the development that we're taking here. So you're working with your team on building basically a big part of that. What is one of your favorite other organizations or efforts in this space?
Let's see. So, I mean, I really, like I mentioned, I think I really like, this is not really a team or organization, but the Bitcoin space. I like Ethereum as well. I think they're coming up with a lot of new interesting things. Of course, despite the high frequency of forks, that's kind of the one thing that's a little bit of an issue. But I think they're learning, and there's certain things where they could you could say, well, it's not as reliable or secure as Bitcoin, but it's more experimental. So there's like pros and cons, right? And I really like OpenBazaar. I think they're a pretty amazing project. If you think about it, it's a crazy vision. Decentralized Amazon, decentralized eBay. That's huge. I really hope it succeeds. And they're all great guys. We know them pretty well. I really like IPFS. I think that's a pretty cool project, and with Filecoin. I also like MediaChain a lot. I mean, these are all USP portfolio companies, so we interact with them pretty often. I like.
Who would you like to work with?
Who would I like to work with?
Like, do you see an overlap between one of these companies or organizations where you can okay, we can make a partnership there?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, OpenBazaar uses us for our naming. So if you go to any store and you type in a store username, that's powered by us. And we're writing an IPFS driver so that you can, if an application wants to store data with you, you can back it up on IPFS. And we're also exploring ways that we can work with MediaChain. So all three of those, and the MediaChain is going to be using this for identity and discovery of content. And then I haven't spoken with Matrix, but they seem pretty interesting to me. I think if we ever have some kind of decentralized chat application, probably either way, whether we build it or some developer in the Blockstack community builds it, I think building on top of Matrix would be a pretty cool thing. Either that or Telehash, which Jeremy Miller worked on. He worked on what's it called? XMPP. Before that, let's see, what other companies?
I think that's a good list. That's a good list already, I think.
Okay, cool.
So basically, I mean, I want to draw the attention of the viewers again to why this even matters to the people who are working in the creative economy. Like, why does blockchain, why does Bitcoin matter here? And I think you already alluded to it. It basically gives the individual sovereignty over conducting their own economic and political life, I guess. I guess economics always has an impact on the political sphere as well. And it gives you the ability to draw in more capabilities from the edges and from the middlemen to your own person. So basically what Ryan is doing with his team and with this technology is giving you the freedom to take part in the world, in the economic world, in the political world, without having to rely and without giving away your sovereignty to other people, or only in so far, or in as much as you want to. And so really, it's really important that we see these currencies evolve into currencies, and these blockchain networks evolve into a direction where they are not under the control of people who have a monopoly of violence, but rather a monopoly of, I guess, assent, or people deciding or choosing to be with you rather than having to be with you. And I think one of the things that people will have to recognize in the blockchain space is that they're going to have to be very explicit about what their values are and what is guiding their development, and basically say that they're kind of this tribe, like we are these kind of people, and if you think this way as well, then join us, and people will join them that way. But before we finish, and before I'll link to your website and to your contact data, like why don't you tell us what you think somebody could do about getting started in the blockchain space, maybe even starting developing on your platform and building their own business or their own entrepreneurial life.
Totally.
And there we hear a siren.
Yeah, I know, right? So can you still hear me? I mean, should I just keep talking?
I can hear you, yes. Okay,
great. So you can take a few angles, a few directions. One thing that we're really trying to do is make it as easy as possible for people to build decentralized apps, right? So we are working towards a world where you don't have to interface with any of the raw blockchain operations, right? And you don't have to work with the blockchain itself. You don't have to work with certain storage systems. You don't have to work with. You can just use these simple API interface and build your application in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and build a fully fledged decentralized application that all these other users can use. And you just plug into identity and storage and authentication and naming, and you're good to go. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And then we can show people, look, you can build this app, you ship it, you don't have to run servers or databases, and you just put it out there, and these users are empowered, and they just connect to one another, and they store their own data, and then you just lay back, and you're just like, oh, look, I don't have to do anything. So, so that's as opposed to like managing that database and worrying about hacks and worrying about leaking out customer data and all that other stuff. So that's one side of it. And then I would say then there's another angle, which is so from that perspective, you should check out Blockstack. You should go in, join the community, see the tutorials that we have online. Our tutorials are coming up in a week or two, but but we have lots of documentation. You can work with the command line interface. You can get early access to the browser add-on that we're building.
So tutorials for Christmas.
Exactly, yeah. And that's our Christmas present to the world. And then from the other side of things, you can also get started today with very raw, low-level blockchain stuff, and you can work on potentially building your own protocol or system. I would say play around with first start playing around with projects like ours. Play around with IPFS. Work with OpenBazaar. Try selling something on there. I would run your own Bitcoin node, your own Ethereum node, your own Zcash node. Zcash is another project in the space that I really respect. I think they've done a great job so far. So just kind of get your hands dirty with all of these different technologies, and try to submit pull requests to them if you can. If you're a developer, try to talk to other communities, speak with people, ask them if there's anything that they want done, how you can help. go to some of these events and conferences. Yeah, I mean,
this is the
just
key.
immerse
Just
yourself
getting
as much as
involved,
possible.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good. So thanks for being on the interview. I enjoyed this conversation a lot.
Yes, me
And
too. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll have some touching points in the future again. And if you guys in the audience want to check out what Ryan does and what Blockstack is all about, then go to blockstack.com, right?
Blockstack.org.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And then also, if you're interested in actually getting started in the blockchain space and you want to take Ryan's advice and go reach out to people, go make those pull requests and start developing, you can also join us in Brazil, where we are now. We've moved from Chile to Brazil, where we are also offering our course for blockchain app development with our Shlomi Zeltzinger, who is helping you understand actually the technology and not just develop. So I think there's another thing that people underestimate when they get started in the space, how difficult it is really to understand blockchain and not just simply start developing without really understanding what the basics are and what the philosophical foundations are. Like if we don't have that, then we'll probably end up with a lot of apps that make the same mistakes that all the old systems do if we don't understand where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
All right. So thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon.
Great. Thank you very much. Talk to you later.